How's it going, everyone? We are here for week 11 salary exploitation. Uh, and that's what we're here for. After a weird week 10, where some things went right and a lot of things like Brown and Bell went disastrously wrong. I'm ready for some consistency, Jason. You got that for me?
Why would we have it in week 11?
I don't know. So 49ers on bye. No Carlos Hyde this week. Really the only notable bye week guy. T.Y. Hilton as well, I believe.
Yeah, Colts on bye. No Steelers in the main slate. That's another thing we can take a look at. We get the Chiefs back. What was Saints or Saints? No, Saints are playing this week. They play Washington.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. Like, we're not looking at a ton of buys. Next week we get a weird week with Thanksgiving, but overall it's not a bad week.
So in terms of salary values is what you took a look at today. What are you seeing in terms of most exploitable positions this week?
I think it's a week to kind of look at really the passing games and trying to get more of the mid-range options into play. We've been kind of on the trend of just basically paying down a quarterback and certain wide receivers and going that route and paying up at the running back spot. With no Bell this week, obviously no Zeke. We still have Gurley and Ingram and Fournette and Kareem Hunt, all these guys. But there's actually a couple that are kind of off the board for me. So it's going to be an interesting week, but I think there's actually some decent bargains or some decent guys in this mid-range as far as the passing games go, and we might actually see a little bit more production.
Right. So quarterbacks, you listed Ryan Fitzpatrick, Alex Smith. I think everyone's going to have a little bit of hesitance with Fitzpatrick this week against Miami, but Alex Smith, not even overly cheap, but for what he's done this year and the matchup he has, I'd say he's pretty much the value, pretty much the chalk that we're looking at on DraftKings and FanDuel this week.
Yeah, we'll start here with Smith. Like you said, the production's been phenomenal this year. He's been basically right up there with Tom Brady in terms of production on a fantasy points level per game. And he's been consistent. I don't really know what else to say about him. He hasn't really given you a dud yet this year. He's been below 15 fantasy points just once, and that was against Denver. 6,700 on DraftKings, 79 on FanDuel. Those are reasonable prices. And, guys like Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, it's kind of a mid-range stack. And, you and I were talking before the show, this Giants team is just absolutely dreadful on the defensive side. Like, they're done. They've completely given up. I think last week was kind of the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, the Chiefs are a team that rely on their athleticism offensively, and this is a game where the last few weeks, even slightly unathletic players have been destroying them after the catch. You think of Robert Woods and guys of that ilk are good NFL receivers, but they are not athletic specimens. I have no idea what they're going to do with Tyreek Hill, but I'm looking at him strong. I don't think he's going to get quite the ownership that Travis Kelce's going to get, but they're all fantastic plays. Let's talk about Ryan Fitzpatrick, though, because as I mentioned, kind of a sketchy first game against an underrated, Jets defense, but against this Miami team, what do you see?
It's hard to kind of go back to the well here after being, terribly disappointed. Really, in that game in general, it was a game that opened up so much value, and basically Robbie Anderson was the only one to come out of it with fantasy points. So, looking at him, 5,300 on DraftKings, 64 on FanDuel, $22 on Yahoo. I'm okay with using him again this week. It's probably going to be actually a pay-up week at quarterback for me. But I like him. I wasn't terribly thrilled with the game plan that was put in place. They didn't really give a lot of their possession receivers or tight ends any real usage. That was the disappointing thing. We get Fitzpatrick this week. He gets Mike Evans back, who was suspended last week. Obviously, I think that was a bigger issue too. Miami, 30th in DVOA against the pass. Like, they're a pretty good rush defense. That's always been the case, but they've struggled against the pass. I think for basically bare min again, we can take a look at him. If you're off, I get it, but if you want to really just stack running back or stack some wide receivers, like I'm fine doing that.
Running back, you mentioned one of my favorite running backs, in the league, Melvin Gordon, the prolific college rusher. Sort of been uh, leaking snaps is how I would word it the last few games for Austin Eckler. I'm not totally sure Gordon's fully healthy. I think that's certainly one of the reasons that Eckler's getting, more snaps. It'll be interesting because, he kind of did make that fumble at the end of the game there that kind of cost the Chargers that game. Obviously in the press conference, you don't say any one play cost you the game. That's about as close as you get to costing a team a game. Had a great game, but I think we could see Melvin assert himself as a feature guy again this week against a Buffalo team that just gave up 5 rushing touchdowns. Is that your analysis there?
Yeah, I mean, God, 240 rushing yards over the last 2 weeks. We saw Bilal Powell and Matt Forte that Thursday night just basically rip them apart on the ground. We saw everyone from the Saints rip them apart on the ground. It's safe to say, I mean, it's kind of hard to just peg like Marcel Darius was holding that rush defense together, but how is it is it time to panic? Like, am I overreacting to the Darius trade?
Well, they do have a lot of other players, but there's a great gif going around today of Darius against the Chargers center, number 75, and he just treats him like, he would treat me. He just like threw this fully grown 300-plus pound man to the side. Like it was scary, what he is doing and what he's going to do for that Jags defense, even though he's probably not prime Darius anymore, but he's certainly a factor. All we can do is just take the information we've gotten in the last 2 weeks. That's enough for me. They are looking ugly. Their offense kind of falling apart. They might, who knows what they're going to do with Tyrod. So it's starting to look like a mess. It's starting to look like a team that's traded away pretty much all their best players, That's what it's starting to look like. If they keep trading away their best players every week, eventually, they're not going to have good players anymore, right?
It was just funny to see them get off to such a hot start, and then you knew the Bills were going to turn out this 9-7, 8-8 season. Like you knew it was going to happen. They weren't going 10-6. They weren't going 11-5. Like you said, they added Kelvin Benjamin to a offense that really wasn't a passing threat anyway, and Benjamin's not a big threat anyway either. So it's kind of like
he's literally a big threat.
He's literally a big threat.
He's enormous, but
yeah. But he runs a 6'2" 40, and that's about it.
I don't know how much that means for that offense because they're so inept. But so you mentioned Chris Thompson as well against New Orleans. All right, break it down for me.
Are you not sold?
I've been a Chris Thompson hater ever since he started having those big games. I don't like guys that I have no exposure to in season-long leagues. So break it down for me.
Well, I mean, obviously, no Rob Kelly for the next few weeks. We saw Chris Thompson's production with Kelly out be through the roof. He's getting a little bit more on the ground. He's obviously worked his way into a decent role anyway with Washington. He's been their wide receiver 1 this year. We haven't really seen anyone take advantage of anything, although Crowder looks to kind of emerge a little bit over the last couple of weeks. But, decent spot here against New Orleans. They've allowed the 3rd most receptions to opposing running backs this season. That's obviously notable for Thompson's game. They ranked 28th against the run. I mean, DraftKings, it's kind of hard not to play him at 5,400. 68, obviously, with the half-point PPR, you can make a case for it. But I just think in terms of overall production, it's going to probably be there this week. I think this game could obviously take, Washington into a little bit more of a up-tempo role just in terms of trying to actually score because New Orleans has just been super efficient. And, it's kind of hard not to just kind of look at some of these guys, especially in the role of Thompson this week.
Certainly. Wide receiver, I started to feel pretty good about it last week. And, a lot of the guys you were on and a lot of the guys I was interested in, had pretty solid production. I think the matchups our ability to assess matchups per week now is going to be getting better with this 9-10 week sample size. This is kind of how it goes every year. We have the Giants with Sterling Shepard sort of being the main guy there left, other than Ingram. Mike Evans is in an interesting spot. And then, New England, that's the one we'll have a conversation about. But talk about Shepard and Mike Evans real quick.
I mean, when you look at things and how they went last week, like you said, it was just, a lot of these smaller wide receivers or the cheaper wide receivers hit. And I think this week, we don't see as many cheap wide receivers on the board that I think are playable. So this mid-range, kind of opens up. Sterling Shepard, 6,500 on FanDuel. That's still too cheap. 26 on Yahoo, 63 on DK. DK and Yahoo, you can make the case for fading, especially if the touchdown isn't there. Although the PPR on DK makes it appealing just because he's getting a ton of targets and receptions. 65 on FanDuel is just still too cheap to me for Shepard. I think that's a range you can sit in for basically Kansas City's defense that's struggled against the pass. They've struggled against wide receiver ones, which I think we can make the case that is Shepard now. So I like him. I mean, once again, he's probably going to be a plug and play for me on FanDuel this week as a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3. When we look at Mike Evans, who is not actually in the Yahoo player pool at the moment, dude, he is super cheap. Like 79 on TK, 78 on FanDuel. I mean, I'm on board. Like, you look at this Miami team, I don't see them any guy really, standing up to him and playing well. They rank 26 in DVOA against wide receiver ones. Like, early looks, I think a lot of people are going to be looking at Evans. I think he's going to be a popular play this week. It's going to be a good GPP fade because obviously that Bucs offense is still not something we can trust.
So you're willing to eat that chalk a little bit. Not full exposure, but you like that chalk.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. Like, we know that potential upside, and the fact that, I mean, it's a great matchup. Like, there's not a lot of good plays this week. You have DeAndre Hopkins, who's going to see probably Patrick Peterson. Green against Denver might be worth a look in GPPs. Like, there's not a lot of top-end wide receivers that I'm loving this week. Michael Thomas, get out of there with that price.
I know. So Patriots like taking away your best option normally.
Is that Jared Cook?
So are they going to be more worried about Crabtree or Cooper? And do we think this Patriots defense is not back, but in that bend but don't break mode from last year that we saw? Are they back to that, or are you not buying it?
I'm not buying it. I mean, like, they played well against, obviously like the Jets and the Bucs and stuff. And, they played well. They haven't been playing defenses that rank in the top tier for me. Like, it's been a while since they've had that happen. I don't know. It's hard for me to buy it. I think Oakland comes out. Obviously, they're in, must-win mode for the rest of the year, trying to crack a wild card spot basically in that conference. They're cheap. I mean, Crabtree, Carr, Cooper are fairly cheap, more so on DraftKings than FanDuel. But, like, I think we have to look at them. You're probably going to see shadow situations really on both Cooper and Crabtree with Gilmore and Butler. But it's not anything that I'm really completely shying away from. So I think the mid-ranges, they're appropriately priced. And we can take a look at this week, especially if Patriots kind of get out to a little bit of a lead and put the pressure on Oakland.
So you think that's a game stack type of game? Go all in?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think, if you're playing Patriots, like, I think a Cooper Crabtree, combo is worth a look in there. Like, you can play that opposing stack. If you're playing Cooks or if you're playing a Gronk with Brady, like, I would get a Cooper or Crabtree to kind of correlate.
So I look at what Emmanuel Sanders did, and that looks very similar to what Amari Cooper could do. Obviously, he's had trouble holding onto the ball, but the type of moves Sanders was making are very similar to what Amari Cooper does best. So certainly look at that, especially if Butler's on him. I definitely like that matchup for Cooper if that's the case. And yeah, I mean, you threw Jared Cook in here for tight ends along with Ben Watson. What are you looking at for Jared Cook?
I mean, he's kind of in this mid-range. Like, there's not a cheap tight end that I'm really in love with this week. Watson's just a DK guy. I mean, really, like, we're not really getting a discount on any one name here, and they're kind of in tougher matchups or not really being used how they were earlier in the year. if for some reason Jordan Reed sits again, although it looks like he'll probably play this week, Vernon Davis is 5,200 on FanDuel against New Orleans. I think you can look there. But Cook, once again, he's kind of been involved in some of the bigger upside games this year. New England, middle of the road. Cooks is actually 8th in fantasy points per snap this season, just 0.3 behind Zach Ertz, which I kind of find that kind of surprised me a little bit. But Cook's been good. Like, he's in this offense and he's getting used in like high fantasy potential roles where he's going down the field and just getting these long 30, 40-yard catches. Like, I'm on board the Cook train. Like, if you think that they're going to take away the wide receivers, like, Cook's a sneaky GPP play this week.
Yeah, he's caught 18 of his last 21 targets. I mean, he's been on fire. He's always possessed the athletic ability. He just played for the Rams for 5 years and the Titans before that, so that's really what's happened in his career. And we got to see that in the playoffs last year with Green Bay. And this is what he looks like in a featured, not a featured role, but a good role in a high octane passing offense. So I like it. Ben Watson, you mentioned.
Yeah.
He's got a role.
He's got a roll. Like, he rolls out 2 yards and catches a pass, and that's it. Like, that's what Ben Watson is. He's not moving down the field. He's going 6 yards or less and turning around and making these catches. And on DK, that works. He's got 38 receptions this season. That's as many as Gronkowski. That's one more than Kyle Rudolph. He's only been below 8 DK points just once this season. Basically, if you want to pay up for premium tight ends, you got to pay up and get it. You got to go Kelsey. You want that type of exposure. You got to pay up in price to get it. So, like, there's kind of an ugly mid-range outside of Cook, and I think Watson's a reasonable punt on DraftKings where he's only 2.8. If he can get you 8-9 points, like, I'm fine with that. You're paying up at other positions that can potentially balance it out. That's not going to kill you for 2,800. So I'm okay with him. Green Bay's middle of the road against tight ends. That's all I have good to say about Baltimore, because we're going to talk about Baltimore here in a few seconds.
The Packers have to get rid of Blake Martinez. I've been watching their games recently, especially that Lions game. I don't know if he's good against the run or anything. He is one of the biggest liabilities in the pass game I've ever seen. I mean, especially against a guy like Theo Riddick or whatever. Like, if he's against any semi-athletic player, he's going to get smoked. And, I mean, we've been seeing that happening. I don't know if he's going to be matched up with Ben Watson, but that could be a potential, situation to exploit there. Defenses, we just talked about Watson, but you said Packers D, along with the Bengals. Joe Flacco has not gotten it going yet this year, other than that one game before the bye. So, what's your take here?
Well, I mean, you said it. Like, can we look at Joe Flacco and think that he's going to put up fantasy points right now? Probably not.
No.
And I just think, on the road against Green Bay, where they're going to basically be running the ball quite a bit, trying to keep away from this offense, plays average defense is probably what I put the Packers at. They're basically a punt, on DK, Yahoo, like 2,700 is fine there, 13 on Yahoo. You're fine with 7-8 fantasy points. I don't think they have a ton of upside, just because I don't think their defense is that great, but I think you can get by here against Baltimore for those prices. 45 on FanDuel, I'd probably rather spend a little bit more to get some other guys and get some potential upside, like Philly. You can go with Arizona. Like, there's a couple other that are just in a couple hundred range on FanDuel, but DK and Yahoo, those are, I think the Packers are a tremendous punt.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do think if Jeremy Maclin plays, he could be an exploitable piece, but in terms of playing Flacco, I mean, there's just, it's just so ugly for that passing game to get going, and good passing teams can take advantage of that Packers D. I'm just not sure Baltimore can. So I like that call. Bengals, I don't know. This was our debate before the show. Obviously, Brock Osweiler is horrific. I will not deny that. But I think that's our pivot point here that I might be slightly staying away from. But what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you took a couple of shots before the show, and you were trying to convince me Brock Osweiler wasn't that bad.
Shots of skim milk, yeah.
Yeah. So a little bit of almond milk, it was just kind of, you were getting a little wild. The only thing that for me is the biggest downside is the fact that Cincinnati's on the road. Like, that's the only thing that I think that keeps them from being cash game defense this week. The Broncos are allowing the most fantasy points per game to opposing defenses this season. You were just telling me about how that defense is being put into so many bad spots. That's just because that offense really hasn't been that great. They're a perfect tournament play, for me this week. It's still a Bengals defense that has some playmaking potential. Obviously they've been better at home, but that's just, that's kind of the nature of how things go. So I look at them as a good GPP defense. I can't look at Denver really in any fashion right now outside of the offense.
Yeah, Denver is like, they just can't hold on to the ball. Their offense, it's just like when in hot potato and they just go, whoa, and the ball just goes, and then it's turned over at their own 20. And, that could certainly happen again this week. But I do think Brock has been playing a little bit better than Trevor Siemian was. He was a carcass those last few weeks, that's for sure.
Russ, can I tell you something real quick? John Elway could go on the field now and play better than both of them.
There's a lot. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So anything else you want to throw in there before we head out for the week?
No, I mean, that's pretty just much early speculation on what we're seeing here as far as pricing goes. Obviously, we'll have the slate breakdown where we break into some of the other guys, because I don't think it's a particularly clean week in terms of value. So I didn't put as much value plays or guys that are below 5K or 4K than what I usually do. So we'll kind of explain the lineup construction and how that could possibly change things.
Certainly. So if you like what we're doing here, certainly check out this article on dailyfantasycafe.com. If you like this video, certainly give us a like and subscribe to our channel. And I guess we'll see you guys later in the week and also in week 12.